The Girl and the Stranger. Once Ichthyander was out in the ocean after a storm. Surfacing, he spotted what looked to him like a piece of white sail torn by the storm off some fishing smack. Coming nearer, he realized to his surprise that it was a woman, or rather a young girl, tied to a board of wood. Was she dead? The thought so upset him that for the first time in his life a feeling of hostility towards the ocean stirred within him. Or perhaps she was only unconscious? Holding up the girl's pretty head that was lolling to one side, Ichthyander grasped the board and pushed shorewards. He swam for all he was worth, as he had never swum before, stopping only to see to the girl's head, which kept slipping off the board. And he kept whispering to her as he used to whisper to fish in trouble, "Wait a little, it'll soon be over." He wanted the girl to open her eyes and yet was afraid of it. He wanted her to come to life and yet was afraid she would get frightened. Had he not better take off his goggles and gloves? But that would take time, and then he would not be able to make half as much progress with his gloves off. And so he pressed on, pushing the board with the girl closer and closer inshore. At last he reached the heavy surf. Sharp was the word now. The waves were propelling him shorewards. Ichthyander kept feeling with his foot for a shallow place. Finally he struck bottom, safely steered his burden ashore, untied the girl and, laying her in the shade of a bush-grown dune, began administering artificial respiration. He thought he saw her eyelids quiver, and putting his ear against the girl's heart he detected a faint beating. She was alive. He very nearly cried out with joy. Then the girl half opened her eyes, caught sight of Ichthyander and shuddered and shut her eyes again. Ichthyander was at once gladdened and chagrined. Well, anyway, I've saved the girl, he thought. Now he ought to be going away to avoid frightening her. But could he leave her as she was now all alone too? Even as he thought this he heard somebody's heavy footfalls. This was no time for indecision. Ichthyander ducked into a wave, swam underwater to the nearest reef, broke the surface in its shelter and watched developments. From behind the dune a swarthy man with a mustache and goatee showing from under a wide-brimmed hat swung into view. At the sight of the girl he exclaimed, "Gracias a Gestus y Maria," started to run towards her, then suddenly veered to the water's edge and into the oncoming wave. Thoroughly drenched he ran back towards the girl, started artificial respiration, whatever for, Ichthyander wondered, then bent low over the girl's face and kissed her. Presently he began speaking to her, rapidly and agitatedly. Snatches of phrases floated to Ichthyander. "I warned you, it was sheer madness. Good thing I thought of tying you to a board." The girl opened her eyes and raised her head a little. Her face expressed fear, followed by surprise, then indignation and displeasure. The goateed man kept up a voluble flow of talk as he helped her up. But she was evidently still too weak and he eased her back onto the sand. Nor was it until about half an hour later that she could stand up again and walk. On their way they passed quite close to where Ichthyander was hiding. The girl was saying, "So, it was you who saved my life? Thank you. May God reward you for this." "You alone can reward me," said the swarthy-skinned man. The girl seemed not to hear the man's words. "It's strange," she said after a pause. "I thought I saw a monster at my side." "That was your imagination," the man said. "Or again it might have been the wicked one come to claim your soul. Say a prayer and lean on my arm with me around. You needn't be afraid of any devil." And they were gone, the wonder girl and the evil man who was trying to make her believe it was he who had rescued her from the sea. But Ichthyander was in no position to give him the lie. Let him do as he liked. Ichthyander had done what he could. The girl and her companion had disappeared behind the dunes, but Ichthyander was still looking their way. Then he turned round and faced the ocean. How big it was and how empty. A wave had tossed a silver-bellied blue-backed fish on the sand. Ichthyander looked round him. Not a soul in sight. He left his cover, retrieved the fish and threw it into the water. The fish swam away, but Ichthyander felt sad without knowing why. For time he wandered about the deserted beach, picking up fish and restoring them to their element. Gradually he was carried away by his work. Soon his usual high spirits were restored and, forgetting all about time, he pressed on, only breaking for an occasional plunge to cool his gills. It wasn't until quite dark that he finally turned for home. Ichthyander's valet, Salvatore, was going into the mountains again, this time without Christo. Apparently well satisfied with Christo's work, Salvatore was leaving him behind to his now permanent duties of Ichthyander's servant. That suited Christo's book, for it would facilitate his meeting with Baltasar. Christo had already sent word to him that he had discovered the sea devil's whereabouts. It was time for them to lay plans for his kidnapping. For some time now Christo had been living in the white stone lichen-covered cottage and seeing much of Ichthyander. Soon they had become good friends. Ichthyander, for whom human companionship was a welcome novelty, had fairly cottoned to the old Indian, who was so ready with tales about life on land, something Ichthyander knew little about. But he knew more about life in the sea than the world's greatest experts on the subject all rolled in one. He had a good grounding in geography, at least as far as the oceans, seas and major rivers went, and also knew something of astronomy, navigation, physics, botany and zoology. But he knew little about men, actually nothing beyond the mere fact of the existence of different races on Earth, something still vaguer about their history, and as to their political and economic relations, his knowledge did not exceed that of a 5-year-old. At noon, when it grew hot, Ichthyander would descend into the underground cave and swim away. He would return to the cottage when the heat had abated and stay there till the next morning. But if it rained, or there was a storm at sea, he would as often as not remain in the cottage the whole day and feel all right owing to the extra moisture. The house was not big, just 4 rooms, one leading into another, and a kitchen. Christo lived in the room next to the kitchen. Then came the dining room and a big library. Ichthyander could read Spanish and English. The farthest and biggest room was Ichthyander's bedroom. A big bath took up most of its center. The bed was on the side, against one of the walls, but Ichthyander seemed to prefer the bath to it. Before going away, however, Salvatore had ordered Christo to see to it that Ichthyander slept in his bed no less than 3 nights a week, and so every night Christo saw Ichthyander to bed and grumbled like an old nurse if the young man was being disobedient. "But I find it a good deal pleasanter sleeping in the water," protested Ichthyander. "The doctor's orders were that you should sleep in bed, you mustn't disobey your father." Though Ichthyander called Salvatore father, the old Indian doubted they were blood relations at all. True, the amphibian's skin where it could be seen was rather pale, but that might be due to long immersions. Considering his elongated head, straight nose, thin lips and big sparkling eyes, Ichthyander rather struck Christo as looking like an Araucanian. Christo wanted very much to see what color Ichthyander's body was under its close-fitting suit made of some unknown material. "Do you never take off this thing? Not even for the night?" he asked the young man one evening. "Why should I? I feel comfortable enough in it. It doesn't prevent either gill or skin breathing and besides is good armor." "Neither a shark's teeth nor a sharp knife can pierce it," Ichthyander replied. "Why do you put goggles and those gloves and shoes on?" Christo asked, looking at the quaint objects lying near the bed. The gloves were made of greenish rubber and had extra finger joints with webs in between. The toes were still longer. "The gloves and shoes are for faster swimming. And the goggles so that I don't get sand in my eyes. Besides, I can see a good deal better with them on. Without goggles everything'd be lost in a fog down there." And smiling he continued, "When I was quite small, father used to let me play with the children in the other garden. I was very much surprised to see them swim without their gloves." "How can you swim without gloves?" I asked them, but they didn't understand what I meant, for I never swam in their presence. "Do you still swim out into the Gulf?" asked Christo. "Of course. Only I use the side tunnel. Some bad people nearly caught me with a net, so I'm very careful now." So there's a side tunnel leading to the sea, is there?" "Yes, actually several of them. What a pity you can't go swimming with me. I could have shown you simply wonderful things. We'd have ridden my seahorse together." "Oh, why can't all people live underwater? Your seahorse? What's that?" "It's a dolphin. I tamed him. I found the poor fellow on the shore after a storm, with a fin badly smashed. I dragged him into the water. That was quite a job, I can tell you. Dolphins weigh a lot more on land than they do in water. But then everything else does up here, in this world of yours. Even your own body. Life's easier down there, you know. So I dragged the dolphin into the water as I've said, but found he couldn't swim, and that meant he couldn't get food either. I fed fish to him for a whole month. In that time he not only became tame but sort of got attached to me. We made good friends. The other dolphins got to know me too. You can't imagine what great fun it is, gambling in the waves with dolphins on a sunny day. It's good to be under the waves too. You seem to be swimming through thick blue air. It's quiet all round. You don't feel your own body, It becomes free, light, responsive to the merest movement. I have many friends out in the sea. I feed small fish as you'd feed birds, they follow me round in the shoals. Haven't you any enemies? Oh yes, sharks and octopuses. But I'm not afraid of them. I've got my knife. And what if they steal upon you unawares? Ichthyander looked surprised. Why, I can hear them coming at quite a distance. Hear them? It was Christo's turn to look surprised. Even when they try to steal up on the sly. That's right. Is there anything surprising? I can hear them with my ears and with my whole body. They make the water oscillate and the waves they produce run ahead of them. I feel them and so get my warning. Even when you're asleep, of course. But look, what about fishes? Fish are beaten not by a surprise attack but by stronger fish. And I'm stronger than any of them. The fish of prey know it, too. They don't dare tackle me. Zoreda's right. The fellow's well worth the trouble of getting him, thought Christo. And he'll take a lot of getting too. Hearing with his whole body. How do you like that? Nothing short of a damn good trap would get him for us. I must speak to Zoreda about it. How beautiful the underwater world is. Ichthyander was saying. No, I'd never leave the sea for your stuffy dusty land. Why, isn't it yours too? You were born on land, weren't you? Who was your mother? I don't know, Ichthyander stammered. Father says my mother died giving me birth. But surely she was a mortal woman and not a fish. Perhaps, Ichthyander agreed. Christo gave a short laugh. Now tell me, why did you molest the fishermen, cutting their nets, throwing their catch back into the sea and all that? Because they caught more than they could eat. But they caught fish to sell it. Ichthyander did not understand. So that other people could eat fish too, the Indian had to explain. Why, are there so many people? Ichthyander queried in surprise. Haven't they got enough animals and birds on land? Why do they have to come to the ocean? Ah, that's not so easy to explain, Christo said with a yawn. It's time you were in bed, though. So don't you go crawling into the bathtub again. Your father will be displeased, and he went out. Ichthyander was already gone when Christo came in early next morning to find a little pool of water on the flagstones. Slept in the bathtub again, did he? The Indian said grumpily. And then went out to sea. Ichthyander was late for his breakfast that day. He seemed upset over something, the way he poked about with his fork in the plate. Roast meat again, he said. That's right, Christo said in a stern voice. Those are doctor's orders. Looks like you've been eating raw fish in the sea again. If this goes on much longer you'll not be able to touch roast meat, much less eat it. And you slept in the bathtub. You'll get that pain in the sides again, as sure as eggs is eggs. And now you're late for breakfast. When doctor comes back I'll complain to him, see if I don't. Why, you've got quite out of hand lately. Don't tell him, Christo. I don't want to make him sad. Ichthyander hung his head and was back in his thoughts. Then he suddenly raised his big, now melancholy, eyes at the Indian. Listen, Christo, he said, I saw a girl this morning. Never before have I seen anything nearly as beautiful, not even under the waves. So our land is not all that bad after all, said Christo. I was riding my dolphin when I saw her. On the beach near Buenos Aires. She had blue eyes and golden hair. And he added, but when she saw me she got frightened and ran away. Oh, why didn't I take the goggles and gloves off? After a pause he said in a low voice. Once I pulled a girl out of the sea. I didn't notice then what she looked like. What if it's the same girl? I think I remember that one had golden hair too. Yes, I think she had. The young man was again lost in thought. Presently he went across to the mirror and for the first time in his life had a good look at himself. What did you do after she ran away? I waited, but she never came back. Christo, is it possible she will never come down to the beach again? Perhaps it's not at all bad that he likes the girl, Christo thought. Up till now, praise the pleasures of the city as he would, he could not induce Ichthyander to venture as far as Buenos Aires, where his capture would have been no problem for Zoreda. That's as maybe, but I'll help you find her. You'll put on town clothes and we'll go and look for her in Buenos Aires. I will see her, won't I? Exclaimed Ichthyander. There are many girls there. With luck you'll find the one you saw on the beach. Let's go straightway. I'll ride my dolphin and you'll walk along the coast. It's too late. And it's not all that near on foot. Surely we can make it. Aren't you eager? Christo said. We'll set out together at dawn tomorrow. You'll swim out into the Gulf and I'll be waiting for you on the beach with the clothes. And I must get them for you first. I'll have to call on my brother tonight, thought Christo. So see you at dawn. In town. When Ichthyandr waded out of the water onto the beach early next morning, Christo was already waiting for him with a white suit ready. Ichthyandr looked at the suit as if it were a snake's skin and with a sigh started pulling it on. It was obvious he had had few occasions to dress in a suit before. The Indian helped the amphibian with his tie, looked him over and was pleased with what he saw. "Let's go," he said cheerily. The Indian wanted to impress Ichthyandr, so he took him through the central streets, Avenida de Alvear and Plaza de Vertis, onto Plaza de la Victoria with the cathedral and the town hall in the Moorish style, then to Plaza del 25 de Mayo with the Obelisco de la Libertad in the middle of a grove of magnificent trees, topping it all with the palace of the president. But Christo's little scheme misfired. What with the noise, the never-ending stream of city traffic, the heat and the crowds, Ichthyandr was utterly bewildered and miserable. In vain he tried to find the girl in the crowd, grabbing Christo by his arm every now and then and whispering, "That's her," then realizing he was mistaken and again peering into the crowd. About noon the heat became unbearable. Christo suggested that they have lunch at a restaurant nearby. It was down in the basement, a cool place, but noisy and close and full of people in cheap soiled clothes, smoking foul cigars. The smoke made Ichthyandr gasp for air. To make things worse, the men were hotly discussing some piece of news, brandishing crumpled newspapers and bawling out words he didn't know. Ichthyandr drank a lot of iced water but wouldn't touch his lunch. A revolutionary junta was formed in La Plata province on May 25, 1810. Following a victorious uprising, the province seceded from Spain and a provisional government was set up. Author's note. "It's easier to find a fish in the ocean than a girl in this human whirlpool," he said sadly. "Your cities are beastly. They're stuffy and foul. And my sides are aching. I want to go back home, Christo." "All right," Christo agreed. "We'll only drop in to see a friend of mine and then off we go back home. I don't want to see any more people. It's on our way. I won't be a minute." Christo paid their bill and they emerged into the sun-scorched street. Breathing heavily, his head hanging, Ichthyandr plodded after the Indian past cactus-lined white stone houses, past orchards with peach and olive trees onto Baltasar's place in the new port. With the tang of the sea ever stronger in his nostrils, Ichthyandr wished, with a sudden vehemence, he could throw off his clothes and plunge into the water. "We're nearly there," Christo said, glancing apprehensively at his companion. They crossed a railway line. "Here we are. This is the place," said Christo and led the way down a few steps into a small dark shop. When Ichthyandr's eyes got used to the semi-darkness, he gazed round him in surprise. The shop looked like a corner of the sea. The shelves and even part of the floor were piled high with every variety of shell. Hanging from the ceiling were strings of coral, starfish, dried-up crabs, and stuffed fish. There were pearls in glass cases arranged to form a counter. One of these displayed pink pearls, angel's skin, as they are called by divers. Ichthyandr felt more at ease amidst things he knew so well. "Have a rest, it's cool and quiet down here," Christo said, helping the young man into an old wicker chair. "Baltasar. Gutierrez," the Indian called. "That you, Christo?" A voice came from behind the door. "Come in here." Christo lowered his head to pass into the other room. It was Baltasar's laboratory. It was here he restored to pearls the luster they are apt to lose through dampness, by bathing them in a weak solution of acid. Christo shut the door tight behind him. The dim light that filtered in through a small window high up a wall revealed the flasks and glass tanks standing on an old deal table black with long use. "Hello, brother. Where's Gutierrez?" "Gone to the neighbor for the iron. Nothing but lace and ribbon on her mind. She'll be back any minute, though." "And where's Zarita?" asked Christo, impatiently. "Hasn't shown up yet, damn his eyes. Had a bit of a row yesterday, we did." "Over Gutierrez?" "Yes. He laid himself out to woo her. But she wouldn't have him. Now what can I do with her? She's no end willful and stubborn. She is that. Thinks herself a cunt. Above everybody else. She just can't understand that any Indian girl, fair or ugly, would jump at the idea of marrying a man like Zarita. With a schooner and a team of pearl divers of his own," Baltasar grumbled, dumping a new batch of pearls into the tank. "He's somewhere trying to drown his annoyance in wine, I suppose. But what shall we do? You brought him? There he is." Baltasar stepped to the door and bent down to the keyhole. "I can't see him," he said softly. "He's sitting over at the counter. I can't see him. There's only Gutierrez there." Baltasar flung the door open and entered the shop, followed closely by Christo. Ichthyandr was not there. In the dark corner stood Gutierrez, Baltasar's adopted daughter, famed far beyond the new port for her beauty. A shy girl with a head of her own, she had no lack of suitors but gave all of them her no, firm and sonorous. Pedro Zorita had cast his eye on her one day and wanted her ever since for his wife. And old Baltasar was not averse to become his father-in-law and partner. But all Zorita's advances met the same sonorous, firm no. When her father and Christo came in, the girl was standing still, her head drooping. "Hello, Gutierrez," said Christo. "Where's the young man?" asked Baltasar. "I don't hide young men," she said and smiled. "When I entered he looked at me in a funny way, as if afraid or something, rose up, then clutched at his chest and tore out. Before I knew it he was up the steps and gone." So she was the girl, thought Christo. Back in the sea, breathing in painful gasps, Ichthyandr ran along the road that skirted the seafront. As soon as he was out of that dreadful city he left the road and headed straight for the beach. Taking shelter behind an outcropping of rock, he peeled off his suit, hid it among the stones, ran to the water's edge and plunged in. Exhausted as he was, he had never swum so quickly before. Fish scattered away out of his path in fright. It was only after he had put a few miles between himself and the city that he slowed down and turned closer inshore. Here he was at home. He knew every stone, every crevice on the seabed. Right below him, spread flat on the sandy floor, lived a sedate turbot. Over there grew red bushes of coral, a hiding place for small red-finned fish. Two families of octopuses shared that fishing boat wreck, and, incidentally, there had been a recent increase in their families, too. Those gray stones were the haunt of crabs. Ichthyandr could watch them for hours, delighting in their small joys of a lucky hunt or sympathizing with their little griefs, of a nipper lost or an octopus invading. And the offshore rocks marked the breeding grounds of innumerable oysters. When he was near the gulf he at last broke water and looked round. Seeing a school of dolphins gambolling among the waves he gave a shout. A large dolphin snorted gaily by way of acknowledgement and headed for his friend, his sleek, shiny back now disappearing in the waves, now rising above the surface again. "Come on, leading, be smart about it," Ichthyandr was shouting as he swam out to meet the dolphin. Presently he had a hold of it, and without stopping, "Off we go," he urged. Obedient to the young man's guiding hand, the dolphin turned for the open sea and dashed forward in the teeth of wind and waves. The animal churned the water as it cleaved its way through the waves and spread a fantail of foaming wash behind it, but Ichthyandr was not to be satisfied. He kept urging his mount on. "Come on, leading, faster." The dolphin's sides were heaving heavily when Ichthyandr put a sudden stop to the race, although still far from being his calmer self. He just slipped off the glistening back down into the water and was gone, leaving his friend behind in utter bewilderment. The dolphin waited a moment, snorted, dived and immediately reappeared, then gave another snort of displeasure, canted sharply and head edged shorewards, glancing back from time to time. The amphibian was not to be seen anywhere, so leading joined at school. Meanwhile Ichthyandr was going deeper and deeper, down into the gloomy depths of the ocean. All that he had seen and heard that day was so unexpected, so beyond the beat of his experience, that he wanted to be alone. He was going deeper and deeper down, oblivious of the danger of it. He wanted to be alone to try and understand why he was so different from everybody else, why he was a stranger to both land and sea. Then he slowed down his dive. The water had become denser, it pressed on him, making breathing increasingly difficult. A grayish-green pall cloaked everything around. Sea creatures were fewer here and mostly unfamiliar to Ichthyandr. He had never been so deep down before. And for the first time this silent murky world gripped Ichthyandr's heart with terror. He went up as quickly as he could, broke water at last and swam shorewards. The sun was setting, its slanting, stark red shafts driving into the sea. Once in the water they blended with the blue of it into tender tones from pinkish lilac to greenish blue. As Ichthyandr was not wearing his goggles, the surface of the water from below looked to him as it looks to fish, not flat but cone-shaped, much as if he were at the apex of a huge funnel. The rims of the funnel seemed to be encircled by rings, red, yellow, green, blue and violet. Beyond these spread the bright surface of the water which reflected, mirror-like, the things below, rocks, weeds, fish. Ichthyander turned face down, coasted along the bottom quite close inshore and squatted down among a group of underwater rocks near a shallow. The fishermen from a boat nearby jumped overboard to pull her clear. One of them stood in the water knee-deep. Ichthyander saw a legless fisherman above, and separately his legs below the water, duplicated in the mirror of the water's surface. Another fisherman got in shoulder-deep. And below the water a weird creature with no head but 4 legs sudden. Lee reared up, looking like identical twins placed one on top of the other, shoulders to shoulders, their heads chopped off for a better fit. Whenever there were men waiting out, Ichthyander could always enjoy a good, fish's eye view of them, full length, but seen as in a glass ball, and swim away before they spotted him. But today the strange bodies with 4 legs and no head, and the heads with no bodies to them looked definitely repulsive to Ichthyander. Men, they were so noisy and smelly, they smoked such foul cigars. Yes, dolphins were better, the clean gay dolphins. Ichthyander grinned as he remembered how he had once tasted the dolphin's milk. Way down to the south there was a small secluded cove. A belt of razor-sharp reefs and a great sandbank made access to it from the sea well nigh impossible, while steep craggy cliffs cut it off from land. Neither fishermen nor pearl divers visited the cove. Colorful marine growths thickly carpeted its shallow bottom. Small fish weaved to and fro in the warm water. For many years a she-dolphin had come here to bring forth her young, 2, 4 or sometimes even 6 of them. Ichthyander found it great fun to watch the baby dolphins. For hours he would hide among the rocks and watch them romp in the waves or rush back to their mother to nudge their way to her nipples. Then Ichthyander started to tame them little by little, treating them to small fish. By and by the baby dolphins and their mother got used to him. The little fellows didn't mind him chasing them, catching them, tossing them in the air. Indeed, they seemed to like it. They wouldn't leave his side and flocked to him from afar as soon as he appeared in the cove, his hands full of tidbits, fish or, still better, small octopuses. One day when the dolphin he already knew had just had her young and they ate no fish yet but only drank their mother's milk, Ichthyander thought why he himself shouldn't taste it. The next moment he was under the dolphin, clutching at her and pressing his mouth to a nipple. The creature, only a moment ago absolutely carefree, now rushed off horror-stricken. Ichthyander let go of her at once. The milk had tasted strongly of fish. Rid of her unwelcome suckling, the terrified dolphin went right out of the cove while her young stayed behind, dashing here and there, also terrified and bewildered. It took Ichthyander some time and effort to round up the silly little dolphins. By the time he had them all together, the mother was back for her young and took them to a cove nearby. It wasn't until days later that he won back the family's trust. Christo was nearly off his head with worry. Ichthyander had been gone for 3 days and nights when at last he appeared, his face thin and tired, but relaxed. "Now, where've you been hiding yourself?" the Indian inquired in a stern voice, overjoyed though he was to see Ichthyander back. "On the sea bottom," Ichthyander replied. "Why are you so pale?" I nearly lost my life." Ichthyander told his first lie and started on the story of an adventure that had happened to him quite some time before. There was a rocky plateau out in the ocean with a big oval hollow in the middle of it, looking exactly like a submarine mountain lake. Swimming over it one day, Ichthyander was struck by the extraordinary light gray of its bottom. Going deep, he was amazed to find that the hollow was nothing else than a vast cemetery of sea creatures, from small fish to sharks and dolphins. Some of them seemed recent additions, but, strangely enough, no praying carrion eaters were to be seen anywhere. The scene was one of death and quite unchallenged. Only here and there tiny bubbles of gas would escape and trace their way up. Ichthyander was swimming above the rim of the hollow, when he was prompted to go still a little deeper. Suddenly sharp pain seared his gills and he fell in a helpless heap, all but unconscious, onto the rim of the hollow. He lay there, his heart racing wildly, a ceaseless pounding in his temples. It was the end. Then through the red mist in his eyes he saw a shark, its body writhing, falling into the hollow only a few feet away. It must have been stalking him until it too had come into contact with the deadly water of the submarine lake. Its belly and sides heaved and fell, its mouth gaped open, bearing the sharp white plates of its teeth. The beast was dying. Ichthyander shuddered, his teeth set in a supreme effort, trying to keep water out of his gills. Ichthyander crawled away from the F8 tall spot on all fours, then struggled up to his feet and lurched on. He felt dizzy and fell to the ground again. Then he pushed off it, struck out with his arms, and there he was at last, a dozen paces from the hollow and swimming desperately away. To round off the story, Ichthyandr added for Christo's benefit what he had subsequently learned from Salvatore. Some harmful gas, hydrogen sulfide or carbon anhydride, has accumulated over the years there, most likely, Ichthyandr said. You see, when it reaches the surface it's already oxidized and no longer harmful, but in the hollow it's highly concentrated. Well, I could do with a bit of breakfast now, I'm fairly famished. After a hasty meal, Ichthyandr grabbed his goggles and gloves and made straight for the door. What, have you only come back to get those? Christo said, pointing at the goggles. What's the matter with you? Why don't you tell me? But Ichthyandr was no longer his open-hearted self. Don't ask me, Christo. I don't know myself what's the matter with me, he said and hurried out. Revenge is sweet. Ichthyandr had been so shaken at the sudden appearance of the girl that he had just rushed out of Baltasar's shop and never stopped until he was in the sea swimming away. Now he was dying to see her, but he did not know how to go about it. The easiest thing would be to enlist Christo's help, but he was afraid that might involve speaking to her in the Indian's presence. Every morning Ichthyandr would swim to where he had first seen her on the beach and stay there till evening, hiding among some boulders, in the hope of seeing her. On coming ashore, he took off his goggles and gloves and donned his white suit lest the girl should get frightened again. Sometimes, his vigil over, he would dine on fish and oysters, spend a restless night in the coastal waters and be back at his post before dawn broke. One evening he resolved to go to Baltasar's shop. The door was open, but he could only see the old Indian behind the counter. Ichthyandr was making his way back when high on a rocky headland he saw a girl in a light white dress and a straw hat. That was her. Ichthyandr halted, not daring to go nearer. The girl was apparently waiting for somebody. She was pacing the rocky platform impatiently, throwing a glance now and then at the road. She didn't see Ichthyandr standing below at the foot. Then the girl waved to somebody. Ichthyandr turned and saw a tall, broad-shouldered young man coming briskly along the road. Never before had Ichthyandr seen such light hair and eyes as the stranger's. The young giant walked up to the girl and offered her his broad hand. Hello, Gutierrez, dear, he said tenderly. Hello, Olsen. The stranger gave Gutierrez's hand a good shake. Ichthyandr eyed him with an ill feeling tinged with sadness. Brought it? The young man said. She merely nodded. Will your father not notice? Asked Olsen. No, she said. Anyway, the pearls are mine. I can do with them as I please. Speaking in undertones, Gutierrez and Olsen walked to the very edge of the cliff. Presently Gutierrez unlocked her necklace and held it up by one end. Look, how beautifully the pearls play in the setting sun, she said admiringly. Here, take it. But even as Olsen stretched out his hand, the necklace slipped out of Gutierrez's hand and plummeted into the sea. Oh, what have I done? Cried the girl. Both stood rooted to the spot in their dismay. Perhaps it can be recovered? Said Olsen. No, the water's far too deep here, Gutierrez said. Oh, isn't that terrible? Seeing the girl so upset, Ichthyandr forgot all about her having intended to make a present of the necklace to that fair-haired stranger. He just couldn't remain a mere witness any longer. With a determined step he went up and across to where Gutierrez was standing. Olsen frowned while Gutierrez looked at Ichthyandr with curiosity and surprise. She immediately recognized him as the young man who had left her father's shop the other day so abruptly. I gather you've dropped a pearl necklace into the sea? He said. I'll get it for you if you want me to. Even my father couldn't do it, not here, and he's one of the best pearl divers there are, the girl retorted. I can only try, Ichthyandr said modestly, and, to their surprise, he dived right from where they stood, fully clothed as he was, and disappeared in the waves. Olsen didn't know what to think. Who's that? Where did he spring from? A minute passed, then another, but there was no sign of the young man. He's killed himself, Gutierrez said, peering anxiously into the waves. Ichthyandr had not meant the girl, or Olsen for that matter, to know that he could live below the water. But carried away by the search he lost count of time and overstayed an ordinary diver's performance. Coming to the surface he smiled and said, a little patience. The place is cluttered up with broken rock. But I'll find it, and dived back. Gutierrez knew enough of pearl diving to be surprised at seeing a man, just back from a 2-minute deep dive, breathing evenly and looking so fresh. In another 2 minutes his head popped into sight again. He was beaming all over his face as he lifted up a hand to show the necklace. It was caught on a crag, he shouted, and his breathing was as even as if it had been the next room he had fetched the necklace from. Wouldn't have been half as easy had it fallen into a crevice. He scrambled quickly up the rocks, went to Gutierrez and handed her the necklace. Water sluiced down his clothes, unheeded. "Here you are. Thank you very much," Gutierrez said and looked at Ichthyender with renewed curiosity. A pause ensued. None of them knew what to do next. Gutierrez seemed hesitant to pass the necklace to Olsen in Ichthyender's presence. "I gather you wanted to give the pearls to him," Ichthyender said, pointing at Olsen. Olsen reddened. "Oh yes, yes," Gutierrez said in embarrassment and held out her hand to Olsen, who took the necklace and slipped it into his pocket without saying a word. Ichthyender was pleased with his little revenge. Olsen had received the lost necklace from Gutierrez's hand, yes, but it was he, Ichthyvander, who had got it for him. And, bowing to the girl, Ichthyender strode quickly away along the road. But his pleasant feeling was short-lived. New puzzling questions were battering for answers in his brain. Who was that fair-haired giant of a man? Why should Gutierrez make him a present of her necklace? What was it they spoke about up there on the clifftop? That night again Ichthyender raced astride his dolphin through the waves, striking terror into the fishermen by his weird cries. The whole of the next day Ichthyender spent below the water, goggled but gloveless, crawling along the sandy bottom in search of pearl shells. In the evening he came back, to the grumbling of Christo. Early the next morning he was at the rock where Gutierrez and Olsen had had their rendezvous. Gutierrez came in the evening when the sun was already setting. Ichthyender left his shelter to meet her. On seeing him Gutierrez nodded by way of greeting. "You are following me, aren't you?" she said with a smile. "Yes," Ichthyender said simply, "ever since I first saw you," and, flushing with embarrassment, he went on, "You gave your necklace away to Olsen. But you'd looked at it in an admiring way before you gave it to him. Do you like pearls? Yes. Well then, take this. From me," and he held out a pearl. Gutierrez knew a first-rate pearl when she saw one. But the pearl that was glowing in Ichthyender's palm far excelled any pearl she had seen or heard her father speak about. Enormous, exquisitely shaped, of the purest white. It must have weighed at least 200 carats and been worth every bit of 1,000,000 gold pesos. Astounded, Gutierrez shifted her glance from the superb gem to the good-looking young man who was holding it out to her. Strong and lithe but somewhat shy, wearing a crumpled white suit, he did not look like one of the wealthy young Portfolios. And here he was offering her, a girl he hardly knew at all, such a present. "Do take it please," Ichthyender insisted. "No," Gutierrez said, shaking her head. "L cannot accept from you such a valuable present." "Valuable?" Ichthyender rejoined hotly. "Why, there are thousands of pearls like this on the sea bottom." Gutierrez smiled. Ichthyender once more felt embarrassed and was silent for a moment. "Please," he said. "No." Ichthyender frowned. Now he felt offended. "If you don't want to take it for yourself, then take it for Olsen. He won't refuse." Gutierrez was angry. "It wasn't for himself he took it," she said in a severe tone of voice. "You don't know anything. So it's no, is it?" "No." Then Ichthyender threw the pearl far out into the sea, and with a curt nod turned round on his heels and went down to the road. What he had done left Gutierrez dumbstruck. To throw $1,000,000 fortune into the sea, just like a pebble picked up from the beach. She felt ashamed too, and scolded herself for being so heartless as to hurt that strange young man's feelings. "Wait, where are you going?" But Ichthyender was going away, his head bowed. Then Gutierrez caught up with him, took him by his hand and looked into his face. Tears were running down the young man's cheeks. He had never wept before and was wondering why everything round looked blurred as if he were swimming underwater with no goggles on. "Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you," the girl said and took him by both his hands. The impatience of Zarita. After this event Ichthyender swam every evening to the shore near the city, walked to the place where he hid his suit, put it on and went to the headland to meet Gutierrez. Together they strolled along the shore, talking animatedly. Who was Gutierrez's new friend? She wouldn't have been able to answer that. He was intelligent and witty and knew many things she did not know, and yet, sometimes, he did not understand things a schoolboy would not need to think twice about. This she could not explain. Ichthyender did not speak about himself much. He shrank from telling her the whole truth. What the girl gathered was that Ichthyender was the son of a doctor, apparently a man of great means. He had brought up his son away from cities and people and had given him a peculiar one-sided education. Sometimes they sat for long hours on the beach, close to the soughing sea. The stars would twinkle to them from the sky. By and by their conversation would die down. Ichthyander was happy. "It's time I was going back," the girl would say. Reluctantly Ichthyander rose, saw her as far as the suburb, returned quickly, threw off his suit and swam all the way home. In the morning, after his breakfast, he would swim out into the gulf, taking along with him a large loaf of bread. Settling down comfortably on the sandy bottom, he would start feeding crumbs to the fish. They would come by shoals, swarming about him, slip in and out between his hands and snap up the sodden crumbs greedily. Sometimes bigger fish would gatecrash and chase the small fry. Ichthyander rose and shooed the brutes away while the small fish took shelter behind his back. He also did some pearl collecting, which he found he liked. He was on top of the job in no time and soon had quite a pile of first-rate pearls in a corner of the underground cave that he used as a store. He was fast becoming, quite unaware of it, one of the richest men in Argentina, perhaps even in the whole of Latin America. Had he only wanted, he could have easily become the richest man in the world. But this was farthest from his thoughts. So passed quiet days. The only thing that clouded his happiness was her having to live in that stuffy city, full of dust and noise. What wouldn't he give to make it possible for her to live underwater, away from people and the noise they make? How wonderful that would have been. He would have shown her a new universe, walked with her through the flower-decked submarine fields. But she could not live underwater. Neither could he on land. As it was, he was spending on land much more time than was useful for him. He was already paying for it. The pain in his sides grew with each day spent on the beach. But even when the pain became almost unbearable, he never went away first. And then there was another source of worry. Do what he might, he could not forget that whispered conversation Gutierrez and the fair-haired stranger had had on the clifftop. Each time Ichthyander meant to ask her and each time he didn't, afraid lest he should offend her. One evening the girl told him that she was not coming the next day. "Why?" he asked, and frowned. "I'll be busy." "What with?" "You mustn't be so inquisitive," the girl said with a smile. "And don't see me off," she added and went away. Ichthyander sank into the sea. All the night through he lay on a bed of moss-grown stones, feeling utterly miserable. At the first streak of day he headed for home. When he was near the gulf he saw some fishermen dolphin hunting. Under his very eyes a big dolphin, hit by a bullet, jumped high out of the water and splashed heavily back. Leading, Ichthyander whispered in horror. One of the fishermen was already in the sea, treading water, waiting for the wounded beast to surface. But the dolphin came up half a cable away, gasped for air and was down again. As the fisherman was swiftly swimming to intercept his quarry, Ichthyander rushed to his friend's rescue. The dolphin came up again. The next moment the fisherman was on it, and dragging it by its fin towards the coming boat. Spurting on, just under the waves, Ichthyander caught up with the fisherman and sunk his teeth into his calf. The fisherman gave a few violent jerks, no doubt sure he was attacked by a shark, and then slashed out blindly with the knife he had in his hand. The knife caught Ichthyander on part of the neck not protected by his mailcoat. He let go of the fisherman's leg, and the latter went frantically for the boat. Ichthyander and the dolphin, both wounded now, headed for the gulf. The amphibian ordered the dolphin to follow him and dived into the underwater cave. It was only half filled with water. Air got in through the fissured rock. Here he could examine the dolphin's wound in complete safety. It proved nothing serious. The bullet was lodged in the layer of fat. After working on it a little he was able to extract it with his bare hands. The dolphin had been remarkably patient throughout. "There, it'll heal in no time," Ichthyander said, patting his friend's back lovingly. Now he could look after himself. Ichthyander swam along the underwater tunnel, emerged in the orchard and entered his cottage. Christo was alarmed, seeing his ward wounded. "What's happened?" "Some fishermen wounded me when I was rescuing the dolphin," Ichthyander said. But Christo did not believe him. "Been to town again, on your own, haven't you?" he asked suspiciously, as he bandaged the wound. Ichthyander was silent. "Pull your scales aside a little," Christo said and exposed part of Ichthyander's shoulder. There was a red spot on it. That added to Christo's alarm. "Did they strike you with an oar?" he asked, kneading the shoulder. But nothing seemed wrong with it. The spot looked like a birthmark. "No," said Ichthyander. Then the young man went to his room to have a rest while the old Indian sat down to do some thinking. After quite a time he got up and went out. Christo left for town. By the time he had reached Baltasar's shop he was quite out of breath. He entered and looked closely at Gutierrez sitting behind the counter. "Father home?" he asked. "In there," the girl said, pointing with her chin at the other room. Christo went into Baltasar's laboratory and shut the door behind him. He found his brother at work, in a bad mood again. "It's enough to drive one mad, all your carryings on," Baltasar was grumbling. "Zarita's as angry as a nest of vipers at you dilly-dallying with that sea-devil fellow. Gutierrez is out somewhere for whole days. And she won't hear about Zarita. Keeps saying no. And Zarita says he's had enough of it. I'll carry her off by force, he says. She'll weep a bit and then come round, he says. And you can expect anything from him, damn his eyes." Christo listened to his brother's tale of woe in silence. "Look," he said at last, "I couldn't bring Ichthyandr here because he wouldn't come to town with me. He too has been out every day lately. Got quite out of hand. I'll catch it hot from doctor for not looking after Ichthyandr properly. That means we've got to get hold of Ichthyandr before Salvatore arrives, then you can clear out and—" "Wait a minute, Baltasar. Don't interrupt me. Listen, we mustn't rush things with Ichthyandr." "Why?" Christo sighed as if not quite prepared to say what was on his mind. "You see," he began. But at that very moment somebody entered the shop and they heard Zarita's loud voice. "There you are," Baltasar muttered, dumping a batch of pearls into the bath. "Him again." Zarita dashed the door open and strode in. "Ah, here's the precious pair. Well, now, when are you going to stop playing your damned tricks on me?" he said, looking from Baltasar to Christo. "I'm doing my best," Christo said, rising and smiling politely. "Have a little patience, Master. The sea devil's no small fry. You can't hook him up just like that. I brought him to town once, didn't I? But you were away, so he had a look round, didn't like what he saw, and there you are. You won't be coaxed into coming again. Well, he can damn well please himself. I've done enough waiting, anyway. I'm pulling off 2 things at one stroke this week. Salvatore's still away? He's expected any day now. That means we must hurry. You're going to have guests, Christo, a hand-picked bunch. You will open the doors for us, I'll see to the rest. I'll let Baltasar know when everything's ready, and," turning to Baltasar, he said, "as for you, we're going to have a talk tomorrow. Our last, mark you." The 2 brothers bowed to him in silence. But as soon as Zarita turned his back on them to leave, gone were the polite smiles from their faces. Baltasar swore under his breath. Christo seemed to be pondering something. Out in the shop Zarita was saying something softly to Gutierrez. "No," the 2 brothers heard her answer. Baltasar shook his head. End dejection. "Hey, Christo," called Zarita. "Come along, you'll be needed today."